I pushed open the bedroom door and froze. There she was, Madison, my wife, tangled in the sheets with a man I didn't recognize. His shirt was off, hers barely hanging on, and the sheer audacity of it struck me like a punch to the gut. My heart hammered in my chest as the man scrambled, grabbing his pants from the floor. "Who the hell is this?" I growled, my voice trembling with rage and disbelief. Madison didn't flinch. Instead, she looked at me with a smirk that chilled my blood. "Oh, you're home early," she said, her tone dripping with arrogance. Not a trace of shame, not a single ounce of regret. I clenched my fists, my vision blurring with anger. "You bring him into our house? Into our bed?" The man muttered something about leaving, but Madison put a hand on his arm, stopping him like she was in control of everything. "Don't go anywhere," she purred. "Let's all be adults about this, shall we?" My world was crumbling around me, but the fury boiling inside kept me standing. I wasn't just betrayed, I was humiliated. And this was only the beginning. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the doorframe, my knuckles white from the sheer force of trying to hold myself back. I wanted to lunge at him, at her, but I couldn't even process what was happening. My wife, my Madison, the woman I'd built my life around, was sitting there so casually, as if nothing was wrong. The stranger, shirt in hand, stood awkwardly by the bed, looking like he'd rather disappear into thin air. "Madison," I said, my voice sharp and cold. "What the hell is going on here?" She sighed, rolling her eyes like a teenager caught sneaking out past curfew. "Don't act so dramatic, Liam. You're overreacting." Overreacting? I could feel the fire in my chest spreading to my throat, threatening to explode. Overreacting? I just walked in on my wife with another man in our bed, and I'm overreacting? The stranger, who couldn't have been older than 30, mumbled something clearly uncomfortable. I turned my glare toward him. "What's your name?" I snapped. He stammered. I didn't know she was married, man. I swear." "Oh, cut it out, Kyle," Madison interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. He was going to find out sooner or later. Kyle? The name burned into my mind like a brand. He was just some random guy she'd picked up. I turned back to her, incredulous. "So this is just what? A casual fling? A game to you?" Her smirk widened, and for the first time, I realized how cold and calculated it was. "Maybe if you'd been paying more attention to me, Liam, this wouldn't have happened." The audacity of her words knocked the air out of my lungs. Paying attention? I work overtime to make sure this family has everything it needs. I've sacrificed so much. And yet, she interrupted, standing up from the bed, "You never noticed when I stopped loving you." That hit me harder than anything else. I stared at her, trying to read her face, trying to understand when everything had gone so wrong. Had it been months? Years? The woman I thought I knew so well was suddenly a stranger. Kyle, sensing the rising tension, started edging toward the door. "I think I should leave," he muttered, clearly regretting every decision that had brought him here. I didn't stop him. My attention was locked on Madison. "How long?" I asked, my voice low. "How long has this been going on?" "Does it matter?" She shot back, her tone defiant. "A few months. Maybe a year. Does that satisfy your curiosity?" A year. A whole damn year. My mind reeled as I thought back over the past 12 months. Every kiss, every touch, every moment that now felt tainted. "You've been lying to me for a year, and you're standing here like I'm the bad guy," I demanded, my voice rising. She folded her arms across her chest, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, don't play the victim, Liam. You're not perfect. You've been married to your job more than you've been married to me." Her words stung, but they didn't excuse what she'd done. "So, instead of talking to me, you just decided to destroy our marriage?" "Maybe it was already destroyed," she snapped. "You just didn't see it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind flashed to our kids. Emily, who loved helping Madison in the kitchen, and Jacob, who always asked when I'd be home to play catch. What would this do to them? What would this do to everything we'd built together? "Did you even think about the kids?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. For the first time, she hesitated, but the softness in her expression lasted only a second. "Don't drag them into this," she said. "This is between you and me." That's where you're wrong. I shot back. This affects everything. Our family. Our lives. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed all of us. She sighed dramatically, like she was tired of the conversation already. Liam, I don't see the point in continuing this. If you're so hurt, just leave. Go cool off. Maybe spend some time thinking about why this happened. Her words were like gasoline on the fire already raging inside me. You don't get to tell me to leave my own house. I shouted. This is my home, my family. You're the one who should leave. Kyle had long since disappeared, leaving us alone in the aftermath. Madison, however, didn't seem the least bit fazed. She picked up her phone from the nightstand and started scrolling, as if I wasn't even there. Are you seriously checking your phone right now? I asked, incredulous. Well, you're clearly not going to calm down anytime soon, she replied, not bothering to look up. So why should I waste my energy? I stared at her, trying to find any trace of the woman I fell in love with. But all I saw was someone who didn't care. Someone who had already checked out. The silence between us was deafening, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to scream, to break something, to lash out. But another part of me, one I wasn't ready to face, just felt empty, hollow. Finally, I turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I needed air. I needed space. Most of all, I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air hit my face, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I sat on the porch, staring at the darkening sky, my head spinning with everything that had just happened. Madison's words echoed in my mind like a broken record. Maybe I stopped loving you. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the complete lack of remorse, the sheer audacity. She had to act like this was somehow my fault. My hands were still shaking, my jaw tight with rage, but beneath the anger there was something heavier. A sinking, suffocating despair. The kids. What was I supposed to tell Emily and Jacob? I couldn't bear the thought of them finding out what their mother had done. They adored her. She was the fun parent, the one who made everything seem magical. How could I break their hearts by telling them that their mom was nothing like the person they thought she was? I pulled my phone from my pocket, my thumb hovering over my best friend Eric's contact. He'd been my go-to guy for years, the one person I could count on to help me think straight. But as I sat there, I hesitated. What was I going to say? That my wife had been cheating on me for a year with some guy named Kyle? That she destroyed everything we'd built together without a second thought? Instead, I opened the messages between Madison and me. I scrolled through months of texts, looking for clues, for signs I might have missed. There were the usual exchanges, grocery lists, reminders about the kids' schedules, the occasional love you that now felt like a cruel joke. But then I found it. A message from 3 months ago. Madison, working late tonight. Don't wait up. I remembered that night. I'd called her, asking if she wanted me to bring her dinner to the office, and she'd been unusually dismissive, telling me she was too busy. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Work got hectic sometimes. But now it took on a whole new meaning. The pieces started falling into place. The nights she came home late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. The sudden, unexplained trips to visit her sister. The way she'd been colder, more distant, as if she was daring me to notice. I felt like an idiot. How had I let this go on for so long without seeing it? A movement caught my eye, pulling me out of my thoughts. Madison stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She wasn't crying or apologizing. There wasn't even a hint of regret on her face. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, her tone flat. Trying to figure out how to deal with the fact that my wife's been lying to me for a year. I shot back, not bothering to hide the bitterness in my voice. She sighed, stepping out onto the porch. "Liam, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm not going to beg for forgiveness if that's what you're waiting for." The arrogance in her voice made my blood boil. "You're not even sorry, are you?" I asked, standing up to face her. "You don't regret any of it?" Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or hesitation. But then it was gone. "I regret that you found out this way," she said. "But no, I don't regret what I did. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I staggered back, gripping the porch railing for support. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You destroyed our marriage, and you don't even care." "Destroyed?" she repeated, laughing bitterly. "Liam, our marriage was already dead. You just didn't want to see it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And whose fault is that?" I demanded. "You didn't even try to fix it. You just decided to cheat instead of talking to me." She shrugged, as if it didn't matter. Talking wouldn't have changed anything. We were broken long before Kyle came into the picture. The mention of his name sent a fresh wave of anger through me. "Kyle," I spat. "What's so special about him, huh? What does he have that I don't?" Madison's expression turned cold. "He listens. He makes me feel wanted, Liam. Something you stopped doing a long time ago." Her words cut deeper than I cared to admit. I'd been working so hard to provide for our family, to make sure she and the kids had everything they needed. Had I really failed her that badly? Or was this just her way of justifying the unforgivable? "You're unbelievable," I said again, shaking my head. "I gave you everything. I trusted you. And this is how you repay me." She stepped closer, her voice low and sharp. "You think you're some perfect husband, don't you? Newsflash, Liam, you're not. You're just as much to blame for this as I am." I stared at her, my mind reeling. This wasn't the woman I'd married. This was someone else entirely, someone cold, manipulative, and cruel. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. I turned and walked down the porch steps, leaving her standing there alone. As I walked aimlessly down the street, the weight of everything pressed down on me like a crushing tide. My marriage was over. My family was shattered. And the woman I thought I knew better than anyone had become a stranger. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. Not anymore. I walked for what felt like hours, the cool night air doing little to calm the storm inside me. Every step echoed with Madison's words. "You're just as much to blame for this as I am." Her voice, her smugness. It was like a poison that wouldn't leave my mind. I needed clarity, but more than that, I needed control. She'd stripped me of everything. My trust, my dignity, my sense of security. But one thing I still had? My pride. And I wasn't about to let her get away with this. By the time I returned home, the house was quiet. Madison had likely gone to bed, probably feeling no remorse, no regret. I didn't bother going upstairs. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing as the clock ticked past midnight. My mind was racing, each thought more chaotic than the last. How could I face her again? How could I pretend to sleep in the same bed with her, knowing what she'd done? But then another thought crept in, dark and sharp. Why should she get to walk away unscathed? That's when the idea struck me. If Madison was going to burn everything to the ground, I wasn't going to sit there and watch. No, I was going to light the match myself. I pulled out my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating the room as I started digging. Madison wasn't just going to face me. She was going to face the consequences of her actions. I opened her social media accounts, something I hadn't done in months. She was always careful, always secretive, but tonight I was determined to find something. It didn't take long. Her Instagram told me more than I ever wanted to know. Pictures from her work trips, carefully cropped to exclude the man standing just out of frame. Tagged locations that didn't match the stories she'd told me. And then there were the messages. Private, encrypted conversations I could only assume were with Kyle, or someone like him. My stomach churned as I pieced it all together. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern, a lifestyle. I saved everything, screenshots, timestamps, every little detail. If she wanted to play dirty, I was ready. But this wasn't just about exposing her. No, I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. I wanted her to understand that actions have consequences. The next morning, I was up before the sun. I made coffee, the bitterness of it matching my mood, and waited for Madison to come downstairs. When she finally did, she was as put together as always. Hairstyled, makeup flawless, her expression unreadable. She didn't say a word to me, just grabbed a mug and poured herself some coffee, like we were strangers sharing the same space. I didn't speak either. Not yet. I let her sit there, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. When she finally looked up, I met her gaze, my expression calm but unyielding. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She rolled her eyes, setting her phone down with a sigh. "Liam, if this is about last night, I don't have the energy for another argument." "This isn't an argument," I replied. "This is me letting you know what's about to happen." Her brow furrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "What's that supposed to mean?" I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow sip of coffee before answering. "It means I'm done playing the fool. I know about everything, Madison. The trips, the late nights, the lies. I know it all." She didn't flinch. If anything, her expression hardened, her lips curving into a smirk. "And what are you going to do about it?" she asked, her tone laced with defiance. I slid my phone across the table, the screen displaying the evidence I'd gathered. Her smirk faltered as she scrolled through the pictures, the messages, the tagged locations. For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. "This is just the beginning," I said, my voice low. "You think you can humiliate me, destroy our family, and walk away without consequences? Think again." She set the phone down, her expression shifting to one of anger. "You've been spying on me?" she demanded. "Don't even try to turn this around on me," I snapped. "You brought this on yourself? You had the choice to come clean, to work on this marriage, but instead, you chose to lie, to cheat, to destroy everything we had." Her face reddened, but I wasn't done. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I continued. "That was a lie. I hadn't yet, but I wanted her to think I had. And if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let you keep this house, let alone custody of the kids, you're delusional." "You wouldn't dare," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Watch me," I replied, my tone ice-cold. "You might have thought you were in control, Madison, but that ends now." For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words. But there were none. She'd built her web of lies, and now she was trapped in it. I stood, pushing my chair back as I grabbed my keys. "I'm taking the kids to my mom's this weekend," I said, not giving her a chance to argue. "And if you so much as think about bringing Kyle, or anyone else, into this house again, I'll make sure you regret it." Without waiting for her response, I walked out the door, slamming it behind me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I was done being the victim. It was time to fight back. I drove aimlessly for a while, the engine humming beneath me as my thoughts raced. My mind replayed the morning's confrontation over and over, each word sharper than the last. Her defiance, her refusal to admit she was wrong. It was infuriating. But beneath all that anger, there was a growing determination. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking back my life, my dignity, and my future. The first thing I did was call Eric. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. "Dude, it's barely 8 a.m. What's going on?" "I need your help," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. Eric must have heard the seriousness in my tone, because he immediately snapped awake. "What happened?" I parked the car in a quiet lot and leaned back in the seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Madison's been cheating on me. For a year." There was a long pause on the other end. "Liam, are you serious?" "As a heart attack," I said bitterly. "I caught her in the act last night. She didn't even try to deny it. She doesn't care, Eric. She's already checked out of our marriage, and I'm the last idiot to figure it out." "Jesus," Eric muttered. "What do you need from me?" "First, I need a good lawyer," I said. "Someone who can make sure I don't lose everything in the divorce. And second," I hesitated, unsure of how to phrase it, "I need you to help me figure out how to protect the kids. I don't want them caught in the middle of this mess." Eric didn't miss a beat. "I know a guy. He's expensive, but he's ruthless. I'll send you his number. As for the kids, man, I don't even know where to start, but whatever you need, I'm here." "Thanks," I said, my voice softening. "I appreciate it." After hanging up, I sat in the car for a while, letting the reality of my situation sink in. This wasn't just about me anymore. Emily and Jacob didn't deserve to have their lives torn apart because of Madison's selfishness. I had to be smart about this. Strategic. By the time I got back home, Madison was in the kitchen, sipping her second cup of coffee like nothing had happened. Her calmness infuriated me, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. Instead, I walked straight past her and upstairs to the bedroom. The kids were still asleep, their peaceful faces a painful reminder of what was at stake. I started packing a bag, pulling clothes from the closet, and throwing them onto the bed. Madison appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, her arms crossed and her expression smug. "Running away already? I'm taking the kids for the weekend," I said without looking at her. "You can explain yourself to them when they come back." Her laugh was sharp and bitter. "You really think you can just take them away from me? Good luck with that, Liam. Custody doesn't work like that." I turned to face her, my jaw tight. "And you really think a judge is going to side with you when they see the evidence I have? Pictures, messages, timestamps, everything. You've been cheating on me for a year, Madison. You don't just get to play the victim." For a moment, her composure slipped, and I saw a flash of uncertainty in her eyes. But she quickly recovered, her smirk returning. "You're pathetic, you know that? Acting like some self-righteous martyr. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I refused to let her see it. "Keep telling yourself that," I said coldly. "Whatever helps you sleep at night." She didn't reply, just stood there watching as I packed. I could feel her eyes on me, her presence like a shadow I couldn't shake. When I was done, I zipped up the bag and slung it over my shoulder. "I'll be back for the kids in an hour. Be ready." I brushed past her, not giving her a chance to respond, and headed downstairs. As I sat in the living room, waiting for the minutes to tick by, I scrolled through my phone, reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. Each photo, each message was a knife to the heart, but it was also my armor, my proof that I wasn't the bad guy in this story. When the hour was up, I went back upstairs to wake the kids. Emily and Jacob were groggy, but excited when I told them we were going to visit Grandma for the weekend. They loved spending time at her house. She always spoiled them with cookies and let them stay up late watching movies. As we loaded into the car, Madison appeared on the porch, her arms crossed and her expression icy. "You're making a mistake, Liam," she called out. "You think you can hurt me, but you're only hurting them." I didn't dignify her with a response. Instead, I climbed into the driver's seat, started the car, and drove away, leaving her standing there. As the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, relief, fear. But above all, I felt determined. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The drive to my mom's house was unusually quiet. Emily and Jacob were chatting in the back seat, excited about seeing Grandma, but I couldn't focus on their words. My mind was a storm of anger and exhaustion. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, replaying every moment of the last 24 hours. Madison's face, her smug smile, her dismissive tone, it all haunted me. But the image that cut the deepest was her standing there with that guy, Kyle. She hadn't even flinched when I caught them. No shame, no regret, just arrogance. And that smirk, God, that smirk would haunt me for years. When I pulled into my mom's driveway, Emily and Jacob bolted out of the car, their laughter ringing through the cool morning air. My mom, a petite woman in her 60s with a kind smile and an unwavering strength, stepped out onto the porch, her face lighting up as she saw the kids. "Grandma," Emily squealed, throwing her arms around her. "Well, aren't you two a sight for sore eyes?" Mom said, hugging them both tightly. Her eyes flicked to me, and her smile faded. "Liam, what's wrong?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's a long story, Mom. Can we talk inside?" She nodded, her expression softening. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in. The kids can play in the backyard." Once the kids were settled with a pile of toys and snacks, I sat across from my mom at the kitchen table. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and for a brief moment, I felt a sense of calm. But it didn't last long. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted, staring into my mug. Mom reached across the table and placed a hand on mine. "Start wherever you need to. I'm here." So I told her everything. From catching Madison with Kyle to her lack of remorse, her coldness, her blatant lies. I didn't hold back. Mom listened quietly, her face a mixture of shock, anger, and sadness. When I finished, she sat back in her chair, letting out a deep breath. "Oh, Liam, I had no idea things were this bad." "Neither did I said bitterly. "I was blind, stupid even. I thought we were just going through a rough patch, but the whole time, she was destroying everything." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "You're not stupid, Liam. You trusted her. That's what marriage is supposed to be about. She's the one who broke that trust, not you." Her words were comforting, but they didn't erase the pain. "I don't even know what to do, Mom. The kids, they don't deserve this." "They'll be okay," she said firmly. "Because they have you. You're their rock, Liam. As long as you stay strong for them, they'll get through this." I nodded, but her words didn't make the weight on my chest any lighter. "I'm filing for divorce," I said quietly. "I've already started gathering evidence. I can't stay with her after this." Mom's lips tightened, and I could see the anger in her eyes. "Good. She doesn't deserve you. And if you need anything, money, a place to stay, you know I'm here." "Thanks, Mom," I said, my voice cracking slightly. I didn't think it would end like this." She leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes, endings are painful, but they're also necessary. You'll get through this, Liam, and one day, you'll look back and realize it was the best decision you ever made." Her words stayed with me long after the conversation ended. While the kids played outside, I sat in the living room, scrolling through my phone, going over the evidence again. Each photo, each message, was a reminder of what I'd lost, but also a reminder of why I had to move forward. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Emily and Jacob chattered excitedly about school, their friends, and what they wanted to do tomorrow. For a few hours, I managed to push the pain aside and focus on them. Their laughter, their innocence, it gave me strength. After the kids were asleep, I stepped out onto the porch, the cool night air washing over me. Mom joined me a few minutes later, handing me a cup of tea. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked softly. I nodded, staring out into the dark. "I don't have a choice, Mom. She made that decision for me." "You're stronger than you think, Liam," she said. "And you're not alone. We'll get through this together." For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone. I had my mom, my kids, and a future that, while uncertain, was still mine to shape. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I made a promise to myself. This wasn't going to break me. Madison might have torn my life apart, but I would rebuild it, stronger, better, and without her. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. But tonight, I let myself rest, knowing that the first steps toward reclaiming my life had already been taken. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window and the smell of bacon wafting from the kitchen. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sliver of peace. Emily and Jacob were still asleep, sprawled out in their makeshift beds in my old childhood room. They looked so innocent, so untouched by the chaos that Madison had unleashed. I vowed to do everything in my power to protect that innocence. I joined my mom in the kitchen, where she was flipping pancakes. She smiled as I poured myself a cup of coffee. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," I admitted, sipping the hot coffee. It was a small victory, but I'd take it. As we ate breakfast and talked about mundane things, the weather, the kids, the little repairs that still needed to be done around the house, I felt a strange sense of normalcy creeping in. It was fragile like glass, but it was there. After breakfast, I decided it was time to take the next step. I called the lawyer Eric had recommended, a no-nonsense guy named Greg Adler. His voice on the phone was calm, confident, and immediately reassuring. "Liam, I've dealt with cases like yours 100 times, Greg said after I explained the situation. "You've done the right thing by gathering evidence. It'll help you in court. Now, here's what we need to do." Greg walked me through the process: filing the divorce papers, documenting Madison's infidelity, and preparing for the inevitable custody battle. His tone was firm but empathetic, and for the first time, I felt like I had someone in my corner who could navigate this storm. "Don't let her intimidate you," Greg said before we ended the call. "She'll play dirty, but you've got the upper hand. Stay calm, stay focused, and we'll come out on top." I hung up the phone, feeling a newfound sense of determination. This wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't going to let Madison win. Not after everything she'd done. Later that afternoon, I took the kids to the park. Watching them laugh and play felt like a balm for my battered soul. Emily insisted on showing me her new cartwheel, while Jacob dragged me to the swings, his face lighting up every time he soared higher. For a moment, I let myself forget about the divorce, the betrayal, and everything else. All that mattered was them. As we sat on a bench eating ice cream, Emily looked up at me with her big, curious eyes. "Daddy, why aren't we at home?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd known it was coming, but I wasn't ready. I glanced at Jacob, who was busy making a mess of his cone, blissfully unaware of the tension in the air. I took a deep breath and forced a smile. "We're just spending some time at Grandma's, sweetheart. It's like a little vacation." "But why isn't Mommy here?" she pressed, her voice tinged with confusion. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Mommy and we need to figure some things out. But don't worry, okay? Everything's going to be fine." Emily studied me for a moment, as if trying to decide whether or not to believe me. Finally, she nodded, her little face serious. "Okay, Daddy." Her trust in me felt like both a blessing and a burden. I couldn't let her down. I couldn't let either of them down. That evening, as I was tucking the kids into bed, my phone buzzed with a message from Madison. I hesitated before opening it, dreading whatever she had to say. "Madison, we need to talk. This is getting ridiculous." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. She had no right to dictate anything to me after what she'd done. But I knew I couldn't ignore her. If I wanted to maintain control, I had to face her head on. The next morning, I arranged for my mom to watch the kids and drove back to the house. My heart pounded as I pulled into the driveway, the memories of that night still fresh in my mind. Madison was waiting for me in the living room, her arms crossed and her expression as defiant as ever. "You're really going through with this?" she said as soon as I walked in. "Yes," I replied firmly, standing my ground. "I've already contacted a lawyer. The papers will be ready soon." Her smirk faltered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But she quickly recovered, her tone turning sharp. "You're making a mistake, Liam. Do you really want to drag this out in court? Do you want the kids to suffer?" I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. "The kids are already suffering, Madison. Because of you. You made this mess, not me." She rolled her eyes, but I could tell my words had struck a nerve. "Fine," she said, throwing up her hands. "You want a divorce? Let's do it. But don't think for a second that you're taking my kids away from me." I met her gaze, my voice steady. "I'm not taking them away. I'm protecting them, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they're safe." The tension in the room was suffocating, but I refused to back down. This was a fight I hadn't asked for, but it was one I was determined to win. As I left the house, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time, I'd stood up to Madison without letting her manipulate me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face whatever came next. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking control of my life and finally putting myself and my kids first. The weight of the confrontation lingered long after I left the house. As I drove back to my mom's, I replayed every word, every look Madison had thrown my way. Her arrogance was a mask, but even masks crack under pressure. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't as confident as she pretended to be. And that meant I had a chance, a real chance, to come out of this with my dignity, my kids, and my future intact. When I arrived at my mom's, she was on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the kids play in the yard. Her presence was steadying, like an anchor in a storm. I joined her, leaning against the railing as the late afternoon sun bathed the yard in golden light. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice calm but concerned. "As expected," I said, sighing. "She's still trying to shift the blame onto me, but she knows what's coming." I made it clear that I'm not backing down. Mom nodded, her gaze fixed on Emily and Jacob as they chased each other around the garden. "Good. Don't let her manipulate you, Liam. She's trying to scare you, but you're stronger than that." "I know," I said, though the weight of it all still felt overwhelming. "It's just, I hate that the kids are going to be caught in the middle of this. They don't deserve any of it." "They don't," Mom agreed, her voice softening. But they have you. And as long as you put them first, they'll be okay. Kids are resilient, Liam. They'll bounce back. I wanted to believe her, but the thought of Emily and Jacob having to deal with the fallout of Madison's actions made my chest tighten. They were too young to understand what was happening, and the last thing I wanted was for them to feel like they were losing their family. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat down with my laptop and opened the file I'd been compiling. Every piece of evidence I had, texts, photos, timestamps, was meticulously organized. Greg had been clear. The stronger my case, the better my chances of securing custody and protecting my kids from Madison's toxic influence. As I reviewed everything, my phone buzzed. Another message from Madison. Madison, I want to talk. Face to face. Without the lawyers. I stared at the screen, torn. Part of me didn't want to give her the satisfaction of another conversation, but another part of me knew that if I could get her to slip up, it might work in my favor. The next morning, I texted her back. Me fine. Tomorrow morning. Neutral location. The park by the library. Her reply came almost instantly. Madison, see you there. I didn't sleep much that night, my mind running through every possible scenario. What would she say? What lies would she try to spin this time? I was determined not to let her get to me, but Madison had a way of getting under my skin like no one else could. The next morning, I arrived at the park early, my nerves taut. The sun was just starting to rise, casting long shadows across the grass. Madison arrived 10 minutes later, dressed impeccably as always, her sunglasses perched on her head like she was ready for a casual brunch. You're on time, she said, a hint of sarcasm in her voice as she approached. Let's get to the point, I replied, my tone flat. I wasn't here to play games. She sighed dramatically, sitting down on one of the benches. You've made your point, Liam. You're angry. You feel betrayed. I get it, but do we really need to drag this through the courts? Think about the kids. I clench my fists, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Don't you dare pretend this is about the kids, I said, my voice low but firm. This is about you trying to avoid consequences. You didn't think about them when you were sneaking around with Kyle. You didn't think about them when you lied to me for a year. She bristled, her composure faltering for a split second before she recovered. Fine, she said, crossing her arms. You want honesty? Here it is. I was unhappy, Liam. For years. And you were too blind to see it. Unhappy, I repeated, my voice rising. So your solution was to cheat? To bring someone else into our home? Into our bed? Madison leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. You think this is black and white, but it's not. We were broken, Liam. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. And instead of talking to me, you decided to lie, I shot back. To betray me. To betray our family. She shook her head, her expression exasperated. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet park. Well, congratulations, Madison. You succeeded. You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed everything. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the tension crackling between us. Finally, Madison broke the silence. So what now? She asked, her voice quieter, almost resigned. Now, I said, standing up, we go through with the divorce. And I'll do whatever it takes to make sure the kids are okay. You can try to paint yourself as the victim all you want, but the truth will come out. She didn't reply, just sat there staring at the ground. As I walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and an odd sense of closure. Madison had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. For me, the path ahead was clear. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had something worth fighting for. Emily and Jacob. They were my reason to keep going, my reason to rebuild. Madison might have shattered our life, but she hadn't broken me. As I drove back to my mom's, the sun rising higher in the sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like I could see a way through it. And I wasn't going to stop until I reached the other side.